glass industry, the glass sellers, and their long-lasting links, that's difficult to say, with St James Garlickhythe. And as I said before, you could look at it as building, beauty, bombs, breakage, B-sharp, bells, barge, banner, and beyond, and a relative discovery. That does it for short, if that's still clear to everybody. Bit of a B, really. What it means is we've got a sort of a B certificate here. It's a sort of adults only evening. Anyway, we start off, the clerk, thank you very much for your history of the church, which you put in the announcement of this, this evening's meeting. The background is very helpful. And here is my favourite picture of St James, which shows it as a very warm and welcoming place. And it's painted by Mrs. Steve Williamson, painted in 2004 in memory of her husband Peter, who passed away the previous year. And the title, which I don't think you can see, is Guests of the Worshipful Company of Glass Sellers Hurrying to the Winter Service in November 2003. So a question, I think, is how long have we used James as a place of worship? And of course, it's just over 100 years. But the glass industry influence has been greater than 160 years, in fact. And we love the beauty of Wren's design and the interior. The peace and the church is gorgeous. And the clock reminded us that St James has the oldest complete set of parish records in England. Within early records, there's a mention of Mrs. Nash and family. So I thought, well, I just wonder how old Mrs. Nash was and how many children did she have, because that goes back to the 16th century. And the records show that she had that the first 15 of her children died at birth or no older than 3, but the 16th lived longer and died aged 13. Isn't that terrible? That's at the start of our records. Within the church, there are 2 documents from the 16th century, well worth a look. The first is a copy of the first page of the 1535 register, but unfortunately with lockdown, I couldn't get up to get a copy of it for you. And the second is a part of the almanac. Here we go. It's stuck together a little bit, but in looking at a cover of the records, they found it had been stuffed with actual printed paper. So this is an almanac going back, you're looking at a page that was printed in 1543, which is pretty good. And that at the moment is on fixed to the back of the choir stall in St James. And speaking with Ellis, the verger, the other day, I think we'll probably put it in a more obvious place because I think it's slightly wasted behind the choir stalls, but there we go. Now, in the next slide here is what I call the Kopp tablet. And it's all about Ron Kopp, who, as you know, and his father also, both of them were freemen of the city and livery members. And in the war, the father spent all his time doing his guarding, was on the roof throwing incendiary bombs off, apparently, and protecting St James by doing that, which is super. But in 1941, a 500-pound bomb went straight through the roof, 30 feet deep in the south side, and did not explode. And they removed it after the war. And what it did do, it blew out some Victorian stained glass windows, which were replaced by plain glass. So Wren's lantern, which, as you know, is the other name for the church, got even lighter. What the tablet doesn't show is a huge effort by the family. Ron became the youngest ever church warden in the city, and the church closed in 1954 and was declared unsafe because of Death Watch beetle. And then Bishop said the parish had to pay for the whole cost of repair, or the building will be demolished. friendly chap. But the parish had too little funds, so Ron Kopp and his mother stepped in and eventually negotiated with the Bishop of London, who finally agreed to match whatever the parish raised. The parish didn't have to pay the whole sum. So the Kopp family then arranged a bazaar, held charity lunches and so on, worked very hard to raise funds. And enough was raised so that the bishop paid up. The extensive repairs were eventually completed and St. James reopened in 1963 after 9 years of closure and close to being demolished. And that's all behind that little plaque. So I think a big thank you to Ron and his family, because that was quite something. Moving on, here is a painting by Hardackers of the church from the west, just soon after the war. And you can see the brick wall is just behind, or between, there's a brick wall between the bomb site and the church. Now this lovely picture was given by young Mr. Philip Feather to the church on loan, and it's in a private place within the church. It's a lovely, lovely, unique picture of what's happened in the past and what really hasn't moved on too much from then. So thank you for the picture, Philip. In 1981, Past Master Alec Clark, the Yorkshire-based established glass container manufacturer, thought the name on the following tablet was a bit familiar. And research showed that PCC member William Dunsford White, which is the sort of top main name there, who ensured that the tower and steeple were thoroughly repaired, was in fact Alec Clark's great uncle. So Alec had been master of delivery and spent several years as a past master there, and been passing this on the wall of the church, and all the time since 1854, that had been on the wall as a relative, which is really quite something. The original Father Smith organ, 1719 to 207, is lovely. And Andrew Palmley, one of our very active, as you know, glass sellers and active everywhere, was in the process of 5 years of raising funds for the restoration. And in my master's year, my wife Rosemary and daughter Emma and myself and my son's bicycle took an 18 days holiday, drove to the Spanish border so I could ride solo to Compostela, 500 miles over 10 days. Funds raised 50% to the organ restoration and the balance to cancer research. So we had a great holiday and raised a little bit of money. However, it's soon clear that Andrew Palmley had raised more than that by running a marathon through London in 1 day. So I wonder one's journey was necessary. It was very good fun, I must admit. In 1967, the glass industry family and glass sellers, the Ide family, who had 3 masters, of course, including our First Lady Master, good evening, had a copy of a 17th century glass chandelier, original, in Wren's Emmanuel College, Cambridge. And they had it made by Waterford and presented it to the glass seller company for presentation to St. James in 1967. And it's absolutely stunning. And there it is, hung in due position in front of the lovely organ. But as we know from recent exceptionally good detail from Brian Rawls, in October 91, a crane working on the other side, of the opposite side of the road, crashed across the road. The traffic lights were red and then no cars were damaged, but it passed through the roof of the church, 50 years exactly after the bomb. And this, Brian Rawls included this as a newspaper print of the accident, and there's the crane through the roof of the church. A tremendous mess. This is not a very good photograph at all, but it is a colour photograph that shows another angle of what's left of the crane smashing straight through the church on the outside. And as we look inside, here is a photo of the church. And you can see just in front of the organ again, a little white string, which of course is the basic nylon, perhaps thread of the whole chandelier. That's what it was. And the rest is just smashed to pieces, including breaking up fairly new pews that have been put in there. And this, happily, is the painting by Michael Giles of the accident. And just to the right of the organ, you can see the white hanging of the thread of the chandelier. And I was given permission to show this by the then wife of Michael, Sue Giles, who's still very, very active in the church, which is nice. And now we then move on to this next shot. Now, how's that? Isn't that fantastic? That is obviously the picture of the second copy, if you like, that had to be made. It's absolutely stunning. And to get it lit up, if you have a chance, that is clearly the very best time to look at it. And I learned only recently that the chandelier is cleaned every year by a skilled glass seller who does it at no cost to the church, and of course makes a very thorough job of it, which is super. Right, moving on then, this is extracted from a DVD, and it says what it says, which is that Andrew wanted to initiate a long desire to have a full ring of bells, which we had never had in the church at all. And this is a coffin. We had to, if we're going to have a ring of bells, we needed somewhere for the bell ringers to work, and that part of the tower was taken up by a coffin of a person called Jimmy Garlick. So I'll move on from that and just pause at this second slide for the moment. Jimmy had been found buried under slabs of pavement in the end of the 18th century, not in the churchyard, but he had been buried and was found in very good condition. He'd been semi-mummified, and so he was put in a corner, standing upright in the cupboard for a lot of visitors to come and see it. An awful lot came really to the church to see Jimmy as against the church, which was a bit upsetting. Happily, in 2005, the church decided that Jimmy would be put into his coffin, which was sealed and glass glazed at the top, and got the whole thing back in focus. But Jimmy had been looked at by experts and determined that he was a wealthy man. He'd been well embalmed, his skin was in good condition, his teeth were fine, and he had his earlobes pierced, so he was a man fairly wealthy in those days, it would seem. So that was Jimmy. The public, as I said, were allowed to see him, but that wasn't really what it should be all about at all. So Ron Cott recalls as a young choir boy having Jimmy standing next to him, all wrapped up in a shroud. So that's another memory which some people have, perhaps. Right, the text here is about Dickon love. And I mentioned that my involvement, that we need to make a record of what we're doing in the Jubilee Bells. So we got a professional photographer, filmmaker, a relative of a PCC member, who filmed quietly and went about his business. And then afterwards, we lost touch. don't know what happened to him or the film. And then a parishioner suddenly phoned up to a friend and said, "Oh, I just watched the Royal Jubilee bells on YouTube." That was in November 2002. We managed to make contact, or at least I did, and found that the filmmaker had misunderstood the intent. So we sorted that out. And we got the film, and my son and myself took 25% out, added 12% back. And then we had this film, which, as some of you have seen, I think, is the DVD of the story of the Royal Jubilee bells. So this particular pack itself was designed by my granddaughter and put together, and that tells the whole story from the smelting through the making of the bells to the blessing to the actual barge and back in the bottom to its home in the tower. Excuse me. We managed to sell all the copies we had done within 6 months and put, I think, £4,000 into the coffers of the church. But it was super because it made a lovely focus for the whole of the work of the St. James. And here was the bell. And I suggested that we should raise funds within the glass cellars for our own bell. And bless the generous hearts, you responded, as you know, and raised almost exact £14,000 needed for the bell and all the other bits and pieces that went with it. And so here is your bell, the bell. It's very, very nice. And this is the bells here, about to be blessed. Here's all 8 of them. This was taken after the barge, but I wanted us to see the effect of the 4 and 8 bells there before they went up into the tower. And we now move on to the Thames, and here's a picture, if you can hopefully just see it, where the barge with the yellow at the front, which is ballast, to make sure it goes under the bridges, and a crane just lowering the actual frame, in which at the top you can perhaps just see the bells. So it's going to be lowering into the barge, ready to go off and head down or up the Thames, in fact, ready to go on to the day. And this is obvious, but it's the front page of the Bell Ringer's Journal. And there she is, the barge, with banners on the side, being pushed by the tug, with more control pushing than pulling, on what became quite a wet day. But it was an exciting day. I think most of you perhaps managed to see it. We had a family of 19 people. We got them all together and stayed at a hotel overnight and had a lovely, lovely weekend. And there are the bells, happily going slowly down the Thames. Now, this is these are the bell ringers who are on their new platform, because the Jimmy Garlick has been moved away. This is there is now a very, very short audio burst, so you've got to get ready with your ears to listen to the short burst of them playing the bells. Here we go. It was short, wasn't it? You wanted to capture that. And then they were down below pulling, and this is happening at the very top. And these are all the bells as they swing to and fro. And you can see just how close to the wall everything is. And the weight and so on of it, and the twisting must have been tremendous pressure. And yet, as we found from the earlier tablet, Dunsford White's tablet of 1854, he'd strengthened the tower. And in inspecting the tower before putting the bells in, it was found strong enough without any further modification at all. So let's get another very short burst of the bells that you're watching. It's a lovely ring, I think, very nice. We now move to the Tower Master, Dickon Love, who is the expert on bells and puts so much work into everything. And he's here. We got him to pull the cord of each of the 8 bells in turn, so that people who had actually contributed to each bell could hear the noise of the sound of the bell that they had helped to pay for. So here we go with Dickon. I hope you can hear this. It's a glass seller's bell.
And their friends. It has been named Charles.
Now that was a bit quiet perhaps, but it was our B sharp glass seller's bell, which is lovely. And we're very pleased and very proud to hear it on its own, which you very rarely get a chance to hear, of course, now. Right, just one second. When the court decided that, or discussed that we might need to replace our ancient, very large and non-usable silk banner, I suggested that we went for a usable, weatherproof design for use on every occasion. And I spotted the banners on either side of the belfry barge, worth 4 banners. So we went to suggest we built the new design on those, that cloth, which would be therefore weatherproof. And that is what we were able to do. And the reverse, the front of the banner shows the glass seller's coat of arms and the date, which is very important. And this is the reverse, and we chose to show the detail of our connections with the church. And at the top are listed the various rectors who became members of our company, and the detail within that. And then, of course, there's our bell, nips on the barge and goes to the tower itself. And in the very bottom is the lovely, lovely chandelier. So that's, we thought, quite a nice a story, if you like, and we're very proud of it. So that's what we did. And when Andrew Palmley was the Lord Mayor, then our Master of the Year, William Knocker, presented him with a glass slipper. You may recall that, a lovely, huge glass slipper on the lorry, but a delicate one that was passed to Andrew. And later on in his year as Lord Mayor, when he was present at the church, William Knocker also presented to the church this half-size picture of the banner with some updating details at the bottom, and is hung as a picture again within the church. So everyone who's passing by can see that what we do and what we have done, which is important. Right, sorry, just trying to find that page. I seem to have lost my thing here somewhere. No, right, sorry. Here we go. My apologies for this, Master. There we go. Right, since that time, unfortunately, the Whitechapel foundry that produced all the bells has, in the last, I think, 6 months or more, ceased trading after 600 years, which is very, very sad, but there we go. So we now move on to another aspect here of the glass sellers. Martin and Lisa, I'll just put that back, cheers up for it. Martin and Scott and his wife Lisa, having been very, very regular attenders for very many years at the church, were talking at one stage with members of the PCC, and the dead area around the church was all deserted offices and was a bit grim, really. And we were very pleased when a new owner bought a deserted office block to say they're going to build a new hotel. Yippee, that was really good. They get life around the church again, so that's super. The owner, however, started to be a little bit awkward about various things, little points such as you will have to start, if I'm going to build my hotel, you'll have to stop ringing those bells, which is a bit tricky. Martin, who had had a very successful career in property development and construction, was approached by the PCC, so he joined with the hotel development as his main project in order to liaise between the two. So for probably a couple of years, I should think, as the work progressed, at the bottom there, you can see the street, you can see St. James, and you can see the street is completely sealed off while the work's carrying out. So we had the noise, we had the lack of availability to get to the church, and it was all pretty tough. And the owner kept on being awkward. What happened was that the various threats and so on continued, and Martin and I said, well, if it comes to a pinch, we'll tell the owner to phone the person who owns the bells, and Her Majesty the Queen. I mean, that would be quite a last step, but we thought we would offer that, and happily it didn't sort of come to that, but that's just quite interesting. So Martin, he had to deal with a change of ownership, 4 different project managers, and it must have been absolute heck. And without his input, we wouldn't be here at all. Some of the things that the building, the hotel has now is at last much thicker than normal, triple glazed in some places, and very, very carefully done to keep the sound down and so on, so the sound doesn't go in too much to there into the hotel, which is fair enough. But the other very clever thing was that within the church, above the bell ringers and above the bell tower, a new floor was put in with an electronically controlled flap, which is open and shut, controlled by the church. So within a very detailed contract with the hotel that includes everything, including the risk of any settlement or settling by the church because of the building of the hotel, there's a detail which has got a timetable which is agreed, where that flap shall be opened. And therefore the sound, if it's being made, will come out at the top and the hotel will hear it full blast. And times of the day when that is shut and they don't hear the sound, but the bell ringers and the people in the church and below hear and enjoy the benefits of the full sound of the bells. So technically that was really quite something, I must admit. Well, the hotel is now finished. Martin has sighed with relief and stepped off the PCC, I think in March last year, if I remember rightly, with a very, very well-deserved pat on the back, which is amazing. So we'll now look and see what else is happening. Here's the hotel. That was a derelict office, nasty and tatty and dusty and dirty, and there we are, pretty close to our church, but nice and silent inside and not obstructing anything from our point of view. Excuse me. Whilst outside, we'll have a look around, and now looking with your back to the front of the church, you can see the pedestrian bridge across the road, and behind it there are 1, 2, 3, 4 stories of building, and that is a new hotel that is being built on the road bridge going across the main road, and that will soon be opened and will then be filled with visitors. So we're starting to move into an area where instead of offices that became derelict, we'll be almost right in the middle of a tourist area once the virus goes away, we hope. Now, the church, if you look at this, behind, straight ahead behind the trees, you can see the outline of St. James's Church Tower and the church. And the grey on the right are the buildings the other side of the main road. So what the corporation had hoped to have done by now was to enhance our outlook by having more trees, more flowers, shrubs running along their curtains on the right, only room for one car to come through, plenty of walking space, and the whole thing looking really, really good, which would be rather nice when it happens. And the budget for that from the corporation spend is, I think, £430,000. And so looking to the future, with all this hard work that everyone's put in, we've settled to a lovely St. James. Andrew's music will still be playing. The present rector, which is Father Tim Hanley, and the energetic secretary Joanne Moss, still keep everything going. And you may or may not have seen one of the daily streams coming from the church of the daily readings and blessings. So it's very, very busy. The church, numbers of church members has over the years decreased quite heavily. But Joanne was telling me the other day that it's now gone back to about 60 or 70 people, which is about a 30% increase over the previous year. It's being kept open more lunch times, and boy, are we all trying to keep it getting to work. And most of that is to the thanks of the glass sellers. So I'll call that the end, if I may, Master, and I'm very pleased to take any questions.
Well, before we ask everybody for questions, can I just say, John, that was bloody fantastic. Excuse my
try it again, Master, you're right.
Yeah, no, that was really good. I had no idea of the extent of the involvement which we've just listened to.
Oh, yeah, and, it is massive, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, tremendous. And may I also say to Martin Scarth, I knew you were involved, but I had no idea what you were up to. Another bloody fantastic.
Yeah, you did well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, the detail that you've given us, lovely, absolutely lovely. I'm very glad I chose to come to this evening's audience of John Hitch, as opposed to going to the Horners, which was my other invitation for the identical same time.
Oh, there you go. 2 capital H's, and you chose the right one, Master.
Well, clearly I did, yes, but I didn't have any choice. Because Paul would have got at me, I'm sure, well, and quite correctly so too.
So if any question, I'd be very pleased to answer them.
Well, can I first of all do a traditional applause?
Thank you.
Yeah. So what's holding the building up today? Nothing's fallen in it recently, I hope? No cranes, no bombs?
No, it's all beautiful inside, but the sad thing is when you look at the streaming, which you can look at almost every day, when you look at the services held by a livery company, there's probably 4 people in the church, that's all.
Well,
really bad.
There are plans.
On a normal Sunday, there's only about two people anyway these days because of the lockdown. But the actual numbers of livery companies may get up. We've seen them up to about 6 people on some occasions.
With fingers very, very tightly crossed, Paul is planning the changeover of masters, the installation of Mr. Colonel Bill Cheshire on December the 15th to take place in St. James, Garlickhythe.
Lovely.
I say fingers crossed because obviously we have no idea whether we're going to be in or out of a form of lockdown or a tier or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And it will be open, am I right, Paul, to members of the court? Are we going to be able to open it to others as we've got a bigger room?
It will be dependent very much on what the regulations are at the time. But Bill and I witnessed the other afternoon the installation of the new Master of the Gunmakers, which took place at Garlickhythe. And it seemed to work very well. I think they had about 20, 30 people there, Bill, was it?
Something of that order. And it was more than court members. There were liverymen there as well.
So the plan is that we'd have a church service at 10:30 in the morning. And then after that, we would do the installation. And if things were allowed, we would adjourn somewhere to have some lunch afterwards.
Can it be streamed from there or not?
That's one of the reasons for going, Jenny, is that they are all geared up to do live streaming on YouTube.
Yeah.
So all the
that'd be
members of the
great.
company that are not in attendance can actually tune in and see and witness the experience,
Yeah,
Which
that
was
would be
what
great.
Paul and I did.
which was very, very good indeed.
Yeah.
And we've got a few ideas that we're going to discuss about how we're going to engineer it and how we're going to do it. But I don't think we're going to start getting everything in place yet, in case and just to see where we're going to be going to over the next few weeks. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I just thought it was an ideal opportunity to mention it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great, really great to see the relationship between glass cellars and St James Garlickhythe. Of course, our bells, which most of us well know about, or our bell singular. I'm sorry. Is it called Charlie? The bell?
Oh, Charles.
Charles.
Can I just ask who's read the article that went out this morning about St James Garlickhythe and the crane falling over? You should have all had it on email this morning.
Yeah, went yesterday.
Some of us have had a busy day.
Yeah.
That's very good.
More history and more connections with members of the company.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know if you're all right for time, everybody, but if you like, I can show you the story of the bells, if you like.
Sorry, I
I
need to
wondered
go.
whether we could ask John. I'd just like to.
Yes, do.
John, I remember well the wonderful service where you had the bells down the centre of the St James's, and you had little posies of herbs on each one.
Yeah.
It was something really so special, and the name of our bell is Charles, isn't it? That's the one.
Yes, it's the third from the top. There's Elizabeth, Philip, and Charles as you go
And
down the ranks. Yeah.
Yes, and those special little rosettes were to keep the plague off. Is that right? Is
Yes,
that
that's
sort
right. Absolutely.
of nosegays or?
Yeah, and the blue ribbon was representing the Thames, of course, across the top. It was very
Yeah.
nicely done. Yeah, lovely.
It was beautiful. It was very special to be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, lovely.
Who owns the other bells, may I ask?
Well, different people. One chap personally climbed a mountain to raise funds for his own bell. There's I forget the first name, Warren, who is a member of the church, who also her family bought a bell. There's another class. There's the City Company of Musicians was one. The Vintners is another. And so on. So each bell has ownership, and I haven't got the papers to hand to answer the detail, I'm afraid. But everyone, was sponsored separately, and it's lovely that way. Yes.
Yeah.
Were there any bells before?
Yes, it's never had. It's the first time it's had a ring of 8 bells, and it's the first time for. When it was put in, the city hadn't had a new ring of 8 bells for 133 years, in fact, before we put it in. And I think back in the 1854 Dunsford White period, there were 4 bells. Christopher Wren, when he finished the church, there were 2 or 3 separate bells in there, but nothing had been done deliberately to have a full ring of 8, which is the first time, which is lovely.
Yeah.
Currently, the bells that are rung are rung automatically for the time and for every service. The big bells are not used at this moment in time because the bell ringers can't get into the chamber to pull the bells and be 2 meters apart. So Dickon Love is trying to get the city to give a better time for the bells to be rung, but at the moment they aren't being rung, which is a shame, great shame, and he is trying very hard to get them in. The other thing to say is that there's about 10 livery companies that think St James is their church. So the glass sellers have got to be continuous with their approach to the Garlickhythe. And John has been significant in promoting the glass sellers. The issue that is current, one of the issues that they are looking at is when you go into the church, the main doors are very dark, and then they're followed by another door, which is again dark. So you don't actually get to feel the light where you're walking into the church. So one of the plans is to have some glass doors. And I'd like to think that the glass sellers livery company, glass sellers charity, would focus on those doors and make the right offer from the right master when the time comes for the making of those doors. They could be very special glass.
I agree with you. That's sorry, Bill, carry on.
John, you made a brief mention of the late Michael Giles and his ex-wife, Susan. He was actually a master of a painter's company, and as I understand it, was heavily involved in the restoration of the church after the crane disaster. Can you say something about him and that?
No, I don't know about that at all. I just know I know him through Sue and the paintings that became Christmas cards and so on. The amount of restoration, a lot of people were involved in that, obviously, and he could, well, obviously was one of them, but I wouldn't know the detail, I'm afraid. Yeah.
He was a distinguished interior designer.
Yeah.
Inheriting that from his father, and was a larger-than-life character.
He was, yeah.
He was a great character, and there are several. We've got a reproduction of a couple of paintings of St James Garlickhythe, and he made many paintings of it. And I don't know what went wrong between him and Susan, but they did part company, and he married somebody called Ailish, who still lives. But that's a little by the way.
Yeah. Can I go back to the bells, if I may, Master? There's a chat all night, which I don't think you would want to do. Dickon Love and his bell expertise was such that about a year after, the following year from the Jubilee Bells excitement, he decided he would tackle the record of bell ringing from the tower, which had been set about I think 10 years earlier at something like I think 10 or 11 or 13,000 bell rings in a period of about 9 hours. And this, of course, has to be a one all male or all female bell ringers, because, of course, with the people there watching to make sure no rules are broken, then they aren't free to go anywhere to follow nature for the time that they're in the tower. And off they set, and in an additional just under 1 hour, just over 10 hours in total, they beat the record and still have got the world record of 18,000 something changes in that particular time, which is really quite something. And another little feature, which is St James and the world can know where to go to listen.